Okay, kids, welcome to another riveting grammar video. And today's topic is the conditional tense. And the conditional tense is the English equivalency of the word would. Would plus the verb. Would eat, would run, would laugh, would be. Conditional tense is equal to would. Now, in terms of conjugating in the conditional tense, you will find that the conditional tense is extremely similar to the future tense. And it's very similar to the future tense in a lot of ways. The first reason why it's very close to the future is that in the conditional, AR verbs, ER verbs, and IR verbs all share the same endings as they did in the future tense. There is no distinction between an AR verb, an ER verb, and IR verb. They are all considered the same, and they all have the same ending regardless of the verb ending. Also, as you did in the future tense, in the conditional, you are going to leave the entire infinitive, and you're going to add the endings right to the end of the infinitive. And the endings are as follows. In the yo form, it's ia, then ias, and then ia, iamos, iais, and ian. As you can see, there are accent marks over all of these I's. What's actually nice about this is even though there are accent marks, they're in every single form over the I. So it's not as if you have to remember that some of them have it and other ones don't. They just all have it over the I. The other thing is that you have seen these endings before. You saw them when we did the imperfect tense. The thing that distinguishes or makes different the imperfect tense from the conditional tense is that in the imperfect tense, you were taking off the last two letters, whereas in the conditional tense, you're adding to the end without removing the letters. So, for instance, the difference between a verb like vivir, in the imperfect, it would be vivia because you're removing the last two letters, but in the conditional, it would be viveria because you're adding to the end. So even though the endings are the same, you can always distinguish a conditional verb from an imperfect tense verb because in the imperfect, you're removing the last two letters, whereas in the conditional, you are not. As far as the irregulars of the conditional tense are concerned, this list should also look very familiar to you. As the same 12 irregulars that are irregular in the future tense, they are also irregular in the conditional tense. And even better than that, the stems of the irregulars are the same. So it's the same exact grouping as we had in the future tense. So for salir, we had saldra, tener, tendra, poner, pondra, poder, podra, venir, vendra, and valer, valdra. Saber, sabra, caber, cabra, and haber, abra. And the last three, hacer, ar, like a pirate, querer, with two R's, quer, and decir, dear. As you recall, we grouped these by similar irregularities. This was the DR group. DR, 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 DR. This was the BR group. BR, BR, BR. And then this is just the R group. R, two R's, and then the R. So the irregulars are the same. They're the same verbs and the same stems between the future tense and the conditional tense. What distinguishes the future from the conditional when it comes to the irregulars is the endings that you put on. So if I wanted to do salir in the future, I will leave saldré, versus the conditional tense, I would leave saldría. So the irregulars and their stems are the same. The thing that makes them different is the endings that you put on the end. For just a little bit of practice, you can try conjugating in the conditional tense these 5. So what you can do is go ahead and pause the video and then do the practice and come back and check the answers. Now that you've had a chance to pause the video and try these out on your own and to check your answers, you should have come up with the following. For pasar, 2, again, we're going to leave the whole infinitive and add the endings on in the conditional. And for 2, it's ia, so we have pasarías, I would pass or spend. Subir ellos, leave the entire infinitive and add on the endings. For ellos, it's ian, subirían, they would climb. Hacer is one of the irregulars. Its stem is r, and then I'm going to put on the endings in the conditional for yo, which is ia, so we have haría, I would do, or I would make. Poner, again in irregular, the stem is pondra, and now I add the endings for nosotros. Íamos, so pondríamos, I would put, or we would put, or we would place. And then saber, ella, in irregular, the stem is sabra, the ending is I, a, so sabría, she would know. As far as the conditional is concerned, it really has two major uses. The first one comes from the meaning of the verb, which is would. So this is just the way that it works back and forth between English and Spanish. So if you are writing sentences, yo haría las galletas, I would make the cookies. Generally speaking, the conditional will have a second part of the clause explaining why that was going to happen, but a lot of times you're just going to use it as the English equivalency of would. You'll notice that the conditional tense has a tendency to associate itself with the preterite and the imperfect, past tense events. If I had the time, I would do this. So there's a correlation between past tenses and then conditionals of objects. But more or less, the major use of conditional is to carry the English equivalency of the word would. This is the last use of the conditional tense, and it is with cláusulas con si, which is something we studied with the future tense, which is those si clauses. Si without the accent mark is equal to if. In the future tense, we looked at if this happens, then something will happen as a result. It was a guarantee. Now we're looking at if-then conditionals. What we're essentially saying here is if X event happened, then Y would happen as a result. So these are a little bit more speculating. They are conditional. So instead of saying something like, if I go to the store, I will buy milk, now we're making it a condition. If I went to the store, I would buy milk. This is going to be a little bit more tricky for you to do because the structure is set up as follows. We have if, and then we are using a tense of verb called the imperfect of the subjunctive, which is something you do not know yet, nor do I expect you to know. So when we work on C clauses with the conditional, I'll make sure to give you the first part of the sentence, whereas the one with the future tense, which was present and then future, you're capable right now of creating the whole thing from start to finish. So this one here I'm going to have to give you. So C, imperfect subjunctive, and then you're going to use the conditional. So the imperfect of the subjunctive, as a side note, is formed by going to the, and don't ask me who came up with this, the eos form of the preterite, and you have to take away the ron. This is not something you have to do, this is just so you can identify it when you see it. You're going to drop the ron. Every time you have an eos form of the preterite, it has to end in ron, no matter what. You're going to drop the ron, and you're going to replace it with one of these endings, ra, ras, ra, Ramos, rice, ron. These are what I like to call the Lady Gaga endings. Ra, ras, ra, Ramos. I'll never sing again. I'm sorry about that. This is an accent mark, by the way. So if I did a verb like tener, the eos form is tuvieron. Drop the ron. Say I want to do nosotros. I put on Ramos, so I'd have tuviéramos. That's just so you can identify it. So if we were doing C clauses, for instance, I might say something like, si ganara. Now, ganara comes from ganar. Ganar, the eos form is ganaron. Drop the ron, add in my endings for yo. So, si yo ganara la lotería, if I won the lottery. And now here's where I can use my conditional. Let's say I want to buy something, comprar. Ending for yo is ia. Compraría una casa nueva. If I won the lottery, I would buy a new house. I'm going to give you a practice one to do for class, and we'll come in and we'll talk about what you came up with. So it's si yo fuera. Now fuera comes from ser. Ser, the eos form is fueron. So drop the ron, add the ending. Si yo fuera un personaje de Disney, yo blank porque blank. So if I were a Disney character, I would be whoever, because if this were me, for instance, I would say, si yo fuera un personaje de Disney, yo sería Rafiki, porque me gustó mucho cuando él rompió el coco. So if I were a Disney character, I would be Rafiki because I really like it when he breaks the coconut, when he broke the coconut. If you think back to what I mentioned a couple slides ago, the conditional tense has a tendency to work really well with the preterite and imperfect, and you could see it in that example. Si yo fuera un personaje de Disney, yo sería Rafiki porque me gustó mucho cuando él rompió el coco, that preterite conditional relationship. So come into class with this one done, filled out with whoever you would want to be, if you could be a Disney character, and tell me why. And then we can discuss this further if you have any questions in class. Hope you enjoyed this one. Okay, kids.